Hello, welcome to The Long Road. I'm your host, Chris Roberts, and I'll apologize a little bit up front for my little hacking or dry throat. It's all this crap that's floating in the air, these little white kind of like little fairy dust coming from the trees and everything getting stuck in my throat, and it's getting pretty tough to breathe at time, and even at time to talk. So we'll start today off with the talking about gambling. By the time that you get to watch this show Wednesday, there will already be a vote at the House at gambling, gambling or gaming if you want to be politically correct. Getting more and more phone calls, getting more letters. I had one letter from the Construction Trade Union where the president said that this is really important because we're going to get something like 3,245 good-paying construction jobs, and they would last for at least 2 years if the gambling bill passed. And I felt a little, I'm not really sure about those, so I went online and I checked on the World Trade Center, the new World Trade Center. And lo and behold, the new World Trade Center, which is a $3 billion project, they have 3,200 workers, construction workers. And so to me, I'm going, wait a minute, a project that's 7 to 8 times bigger than the proposed project at the old racetrack was going to have the same amount of jobs as the World Trade Center, which would be the tallest building in the United States. So, little question there. Then I was called by another rep who said that the owner of Millennium, I think that's the name, they signed a memorandum of understanding with the trade union saying that they would only hire New Hampshire workers. Well, first thing, that's unconstitutional because we had the Commerce Clause. We don't have the right to say anybody who doesn't have a business in New Hampshire and who doesn't employ New Hampshire-only workers will not allowed to have a job here in New Hampshire. And so I was just thinking to myself, one, you're signing it with Millennium, and they don't even, there's really no guarantee that they're going to get the contract. What happens if someone else, if we vote for it and someone else comes up with a better proposal the day after, just waiting for us, they could have it right on the shelf, just waiting for us to vote whether yes or no, letting Millennium do all the dirty work. Then what do we do? What is that, what happens then? The other part is I got a letter from a number of the leadership in the Democratic side up at the House and saying that this was going to be the most important vote that I would ever take as being a state legislator. Well, somehow I thought marriage equality, Granny D's bill for fairness in elections, SEMCEL, I can go on and on, Native American Commission, getting children under 16 to wear bike helmets. I could come up with 2 to 20 bills that I've voted on over the last 8 years that I consider crucially more important to the safety and the welfare of the people of New Hampshire than this gambling bill. And so, like I'm saying, is they're coming out on both sides, and the lies and misinformation is just getting heavier and heavier and deeper. And I just find it really frustrating, and I can see why the average American citizen has such a low regard for us politicians, because I think we lie so much that we forgot that we lied. And so we just keep telling more, and we've made the determination as a politician, whatever we say is the truth. And so you don't have to believe it, but as long as I believe what I say is the truth, it has to be the truth. And if you don't believe so, then your facts are wrong. And so really, I can't wait for this to get over with. This will be Wednesday, and I can say, no matter which way it goes, one of the biggest casualties is going to be a loss of respect that I'm going to have for a number of my colleagues, because there's been a lot of games being played, rules being changed, protocols being broken, building up, setting up the game table so you'd guarantee that your side would win, cutting off debate, not allowing amendments to come in. Plain and simple, to me, in a good government, you come in with your facts, you present your facts, and you win based on your facts. You don't win by providing misinformation or outright lying, because you may win, but it's your credibility and character that goes down the tubes with your win, and you've lost the trust. Or as they say, that the old movie said, Mr. President, you lost my vote. And because when you can no longer trust somebody, why would you want to vote for them? Okay. Last week, talked about the Affordable Health Care Act, and I said I'd bring up some new information every week. And I dug up some more information, and it was quite surprising, and I'm going to show you something over here on the chart. This has to do with education first, but we'll show you something. We've got some of these magic numbers. I cheated this time. I put the numbers up in advance, and basically these numbers are going to be change in state general fund spending. You've heard a lot of numbers going on back and forth, how budgets are going up and people are not cutting, they're cutting other services and stuff. And when I was at the city council meeting last week and I was talking to people, and I'm saying is, people don't realize how much the both Democrats and Republicans have cut out of the budget or rearranged in the budget over the last 3 sessions. I think it's pretty close, between $500 to $700 million. The first number I have up here, this is the change between 2011 to 2012. There's an increase of $15.862 billion, another increase of $10 billion. And I know people are going, is what could these are just state levels, what could the state pay in 1 year, pay almost $16 billion and another 10? So, and just these two items, around the nation, states are going to pay $26 billion more. And I know people are going to say, well, you know, maybe education, maybe welfare, all this other kind of stuff. And I've listed the 3 biggest ones: $2.45 billion, $5 billion, and $3.5 billion. These guys have suffered the cuts, basically $11 million in cuts last year, $11 billion in cuts last year. Well, this $15.8 billion year-to-year increase between 2011 and 2012 is Medicaid. Yep, Medicaid. And what's going to happen is, what we're going to do as a result of the Affordable Health Care Act, we're going to increase Medicaid for everyone who's making 133% of poverty, up to 133% of poverty. And I'm not going to over here talk about the moralistic or the pros, cons, or whatever about doing it, about providing people health care. What I'm just going to do is I'm just going to talk about the facts. So in 1 year, across the United States, Medicare costs came up $15.8 billion. And this is from, this is using the government statistics. The fiscal 2011 data based on inactive budgets, fiscal 2012 data based on government proposed budgets. Source: National Association of State Budget Officers, presented by Dan Crippen at the National Governors Association. of the National Governors Association. So here it is, 1 year. And the other $10 billion increase is in for corrections. So locking up people in jail is another $10 billion in 1 year, and paying for poor people to get medical care is $16 billion. So basically up $26 billion in 1 year. And the reason this is the federal government is allowing states to put people on Medicaid, and the federal government will pick up the full cost for the first 2 years, and they said after the 2 years they would cover 90. Well, that'd be nice to say that they'd be covered 90, but the money has to come from someplace. And so even if they only covered 90% after 2 years, basically rounding that up that's another $3 billion increase that the states are going to have to make up. And that's only if the federal government stays at the 90% level. If you go in and look at the special ed programs and federal funding, it never got up to the 40% of standard tuition. So there's no way in the world that this number is going to stay at 90. This $2.5 billion cut, that was K through 12 education. So in 1 year, K through 12 education was cut by $2.5 billion. This $5 billion, that was money cut from higher education, state colleges and universities. This $3.5 billion, that was cut from welfare and other public assistance programs. So basically, the amount of money that we increased just on corrections basically took out the money for K through 12 education, higher education, and public assistance. So we have more kids are dropping out of school. They're not getting the health care. They're living in poverty and stuff. And what this does, this guarantees we have more people in prison. So this number is going to keep going up. So we now have a serious problem. Is Medicaid going up $16 billion. And one of the things with Medicaid is because people are not taking care of themselves. If people are on, they're obese, they're smoking, they're drinking, diabetes, all this stuff is going to constantly keep going up. And so it doesn't look good in the future. I guess I didn't give our cameraman the signal up. And so we're looking at, I went in and I was looking at some of the poverty stuff. And what it came out to be, it's 21 statistics about the explosive growth of poverty in the United States. Here's another one from the Washington Post. Millions of Americans live in extreme poverty, and here's how they get by. Decline of extreme poverty, defined by the World Bank, is living on less than $1.25, $1.25 a day. And so they did a research, from Harvard did a research on the United States, using a survey of income and program participation, SIPP, a census program that tracks samples of tens of thousands of households across 2.5 to 4 years. The study found in 2011, 1.65 million households fell below the $2 per day per person threshold in any given month. Just think, 1.6 million households in the United States lived on less than $2 per day per person in a given month. These households include 3.55 million children and account for 4.3% of non-all elderly households with children. This 3.55 million children, okay, they're on poverty, living on less than $2 a day per person. So just think, if you have mom and 2 kids, they're living on less than $6 a day per. That's what they got to live on, $6 a day. And why is that important? Because when you have so many these children, 3.55 million children living in extreme poverty, they have a higher rate of dropout. They have a higher rate of teenage pregnancies. And they're all, a great majority of them, are on Medicaid. So the number just goes around and around. And as Medicaid goes up, the amount of money that we pay to help educate them to get them out of poverty goes down. So it just becomes a vicious cycle. And the only people that are making out are the prisons. How do these families survive? The safety net is a big part of the story. If you take food stamps, housing subsidies, refundable tax credits like the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit into account, the number of households in extreme poverty is 613,000. Basically, it cuts about a million. A million households are no longer in extreme poverty. It means they got a little bit more than $2 a day. So taking government aid into account reduced the extreme poverty population by 63%. But then again, there are limits to treating aid as equivalent to cash. You can't eat a housing subsidy. And when it talks about you can't eat a housing subsidy, at the City Council last week, we had a presentation by the Keene Housing Authority. And it was extremely shocking that 10% of the people in Keene live in subsidized housing run by Keene Housing Authority. And there's a long waiting list. And I just didn't realize that 10% of the people in Keene live in subsidized housing. And again, that was shocking. You wouldn't be able to see it. I wouldn't believe it, but when I looked at the numbers and stuff, and it was that's 10%. But when you look deeper in the report, it's even more shocking on the financial status of the people in Keene. It said that these other people, they survive. And many of these households rely heavily on homeless shelters, soup kitchens, as well as public goods for like libraries. We see people relying on the availability of libraries, since you have to have internet access to any chance of getting a job, as most hiring is done now online. You can see that. Go to the Keene Library. You've got people going there using it, but you also see a lot of people at night who can't afford the $30, $40 a month plus for internet, and you'll see them parked in their car outside Heberton Hall or the library using the Wi-Fi. While SIPS picks up just about every kind of cash income, it doesn't pick up in-kind transfers. If my uncle doesn't give me cash but buys me groceries, we're not going to pick that up. And it's also likely that households underreport aid like food stamps out of embarrassment and don't report money earned from illicit activities. Underreporting is an issue. And that's how it goes and says, well, you know what? These people are underreporting, or they may be working under the table. But if you're only making $2 a day, $2 a day per person, and you're working under the table and you make another $20 or $30, you know, what's the difference between $2 a day or $5 a day? Shoot, there's people that'll go to Starbucks in the morning, go out to Panera's during lunch, and eat out on the way home, and all of a sudden they may be spending $30 a day on themselves. And so that is really, really tough. So the lack of supporting education results in more people being in poverty, and more people being in poverty means people drop out, more people on Medicaid, and more people go to prison. So nothing stands on its own. It's all interconnected. 21 statistics about the explosive growth of poverty in the United States that everyone should know. In the 1970s, about 1 out of every 50 Americans was on food stamp. Today, that's about 1 out of 6. Even more shocking is that 1 out of every 4 children in the United States is on food stamps. According to one calculation, the number of Americans on food stamps now exceed the combined populations of Alaska, Arkansas, Connecticut, Delaware, District of Columbia, Hawaii, Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Maine, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Oregon, Rhode Island, South Dakota, Utah, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wyoming. If you add up the total population of all those states, there's more people on food stamps than all those states combined. Right now, more than 100 million Americans are enrolled in at least one welfare program run by the federal government, and that does not even include Social Security or Medicaid care. And so, at this point, 1 out of every 4 American workers has a job that pays $10 an hour or less. Families that have a head of a household under the age of 30 have a poverty rate of 37%. So 1 out of every 3 families headed by someone under 30 is in poverty. There's over 20 million Americans that spend more than half their income on housing. This is a really a sad portion, and this is what I'm really upset about New Hampshire. At this point, approximately 1 out of every 3 children in the United States lives in a home without a father. Here in New Hampshire, we don't even hold the guys accountable for paying their child support. And so if the guy's going to go out and get someone pregnant and he doesn't want to do what he should do and he just wants to go on his merry way, we as a state should be holding them responsible to pay. You know, the police say do the deed, do the time. Plain and simple, if you're going to do the deed, you need to pay for it. Plain and simple. And we should not be delegating kids to life of poverty and poor education and lack of opportunity just because we have fathers who feel that they don't want to pay. They feel it's an infringement of their rights to have the government force them to pay child support. No, you don't have a right to an iPhone. You don't have a right to a car. And you don't have a right to say, nope, I don't want to pay for my son or daughter. Especially a lot of these guys think it's cool because, well, I got a boy, I'm going to give him my name, and so that's cool, but if I got a daughter, who cares? No, kids are kids, and if you're going to father or bear a child, you need to take care of it. Approximately 57% of all children in the United States are currently living in homes that are either considered to be either low income or impoverished. And if you add the number of low-income Americans, it's even more sobering. According to the United States Census, more than 146 Americans are either poor or low income. So 1 out of every 2 Americans is poor or low income. And plain and simple, that sucks because you can't improve an economy unless people have jobs and have a sensible wage to be able to go to work. And let's see, we have one right here. Concentrated poverty and regional inequities. U.S. Census did for Americans 100 largest metropolitan areas. These 100 areas, like Boston, New York, Los Angeles, they only account for 12% of the nation's land area, but for 65% of the population and 75% of the gross domestic product. So 100 cities contain 65% of the population. That has a big effect on how people vote. People in the cities, people out the cities. One is Democrat. Normally cities are Democrat. Rural is Republican. People look different, different ways, different views of life. When you go out in the rural areas, people view it's more responsible to be self-sufficient, help your neighbor. You'll see it over and over when there's a tornado or a flood. in the cities, we all been into big cities where people walk back and forth and don't say hello or nothing. And I was in Oklahoma City and Santa Fe and Albuquerque 2 weeks ago. You go by and people say, hello, sir, you know, excuse me, all this other kind of stuff. And it's just two totally different sets of standards. Between 2000 and 2005, 2009, the population living in America's 100 metropolitan areas grew from 182 million to 197 million, a growth rate of 1.41% a year, which is rapid among the advanced industrial nations. And so in the United States, we're one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas. And total population, basically 118 million non-Hispanic whites live in the cities. Let's see, minorities, about 80%, about 80 million minorities live in the cities. About 36 million Hispanics, about 27 non-Hispanic blacks, about 12 million non-Hispanic Asians and Pacific Islanders, and another 4.5 million of others. In 2005 to 2009, children under 18 accounted for 1/4 of the total population, while the elderly over 65 account for 12%. But basically, when you go in and add the children up under 18 and you add the elderly over 65, that's 40% of the people that live in these areas. And so we see these big cities, they're getting younger and they're getting older and they're losing that middle age. And then you go concentrated center of poverty. But the census, there's 41,000 census tracts in the United States. 2,000 of those 41 have poverty more than 40%. 7,600 have poverty between 20 and 40%. So basically, 1 out of every 5 or 1 out of every 4, about 24% of the poverty tracts, about almost 10,000, have poverty percentage of 20% or higher. And so it is 3 million Americans live in cities, of these 100 cities, where they have tracts of 40% or more poverty rate. And I just sit there and you were looking at the number of the poverty. It was just going higher and higher. In McAllen, Texas, 94% of the people in McAllen, Texas, percentage of poor, 20% or higher. In McAllen, Texas is 94%. And we look at Buffalo, New York, 56%. Springfield, Massachusetts, right down the road, 64%. 64% of the people in Springfield are poor. They're 20 to 40% poor. And they have concentrations. It's like 94%. And then it goes in it. We went through the 100. But when you just talk about poverty, it's little. Okay, places like Memphis, Detroit, Milwaukee, San Antonio, Cleveland, Toledo, Houston, New York, Philadelphia, Austin, Columbus, Dallas, and Los Angeles. They have some of the highest concentration of poverty, but they also have the highest income disparity. And so a place like Los Angeles, unbelievable wealth, unbelievable poverty. Where you go to places like El Paso, Bakersfield, Springfield, Baton Rouge, Youngstown, Lansing, Oklahoma City, Augusta, Albuquerque, Stockton, and New Orleans, they have high poverty, but they have a low income disparity rate. So the gap between high poverty and the people who are not in poverty is extremely small. High poverty, and then places like Tampa, Raleigh, Portland, Oregon, Orlando, Seattle, Boise City, Palm Bay, Portland, Maine, Santa Rosa. They have low poverty and low income. And so basically, these are really kind of middle-class towns. Basically, everyone is almost the same. Then you go Worcester, Kansas City, Richmond, Virginia Beach, Bridgeport, San Francisco, Oxnard, and Washington, D.C. They have low poverty, but they have a very high income disparity rate. So you may have more low income and you may have more middle class in these cities, but being middle class in these cities will make you extremely poor in relationship to everyone else, that the majority of the people that are living in there. I went on to the IRS, going back when we move over to Affordable Health Care Act. And I go and I says, well, there's a lot of questions. So I went to the Federal Register, Volume 77, number 100, Wednesday, May 23rd, 2012, Rules and Regulations. This document contains final regulations relating to the health insurance premium tax credit enacted by the Patient Protection and Affordability Care Act and the Health Care and Education Reconciliation Act of 2010 as amended by the Medicare and Medicaid Extender Act of 2010, the Comprehensive 1099 Taxpayer Protection and Repayment of Exchange Subsidy Overpayment Act of 2011, the Department of Defense and Full Year Continuous Appropriation Act 2011, and the 3% Withholding Repeal and Job Creation Act. A long title. But what this shows is this how Congress gets away with things. They put a little bit in all these different acts, and all of a sudden, they do this. They say, put a little bit in this, the Department of Defense, we put a little bit in the IRS, and we put here. And then what happens is, and they'll send it, for example, to the IRS, and this is where rulemaking authority comes into. And you may get something totally different than what you thought was in the law, because basically the Federal Registry, their job is to go through it all and issue final regulations. And in a lot of ways, the final regulations become de facto laws. And this document contains final regulations that amends the Income Tax Regulations 26 CFR Part 1 under Section 36B relating to the premium tax credit. Section 36B was enacted by the Patient Protective and Affordability Care Act, Public Law 111-148, 124 Statute .119, 2010, and the Health Care and Education Reconciliation Act of 2010. And the proposed regulation defines a taxpayer's family as the individual for whom a taxpayer claims a deduction for a personal exemption under Section 151 for the taxable year, which may include the taxpayer's spouse, the dependents, and dependents. And this little portion of it started on page 30,377. And it ended on page 30,400. 24 pages. And you can see why you almost need a lawyer. Okay? An applicable taxpayer. In general, a taxpayer is an applicable taxpayer for a taxable year only if the taxpayer's household income from the taxable year is at least 100%, but not more than 400% of the federal poverty level for the taxpayer's family size. And it goes, definition of eligible. Well, we thought everything was taken care of as, for example, if you were being covered by a retired service member or you're a veteran receiving health care. For administrative convenience, however, because the standard of eligibility in veterans programs do not allow exchanges to identify everyone who may be eligible for veterans coverage at the time he or she is seeking an eligibility determination for advance payment of the premium tax credit, the proposed regulation provides that an individual is eligible for a minimum essential coverage under the Veterans Health Care Program authorized under Chapter 17 or 18 of Title 38. The USC only if the individual is enrolled in a Veterans Health Care Program identified as minimum essential coverage for the advance payment of premium tax credit. That's what we were talking about last week, where some people and families can get up to like $5,600, I think a little bit more for some. And thus, the special rules for veterans coverage may apply to individuals who are not veterans but are eligible for the Civilian Health and Medical Program of the Department of Veterans Affairs or the VA Spina Bifida Program. Getting a little confusing, isn't it? Because one of the things that wasn't really clear last time is that you have to get this health care, but it's going to cost. So basically, the federal government is supposed to give you an affordable premium tax credit up front so you can pay to buy the insurance. And then hopefully when you fill your tax form out at the end of the year, you won't owe any of the money back. But there's a way that they'll recoup the money if they gave you too much. The proposed regulation provides an eligible employee-sponsored plan is affordable for an employee and related individuals if the portion of the annual premium the employee must pay for self-only coverage does not exceed the required contribution percentage of 9.5% for the taxable year. Well, what happens if, okay, for me, it may be say I have to pay, it's $7,000 for a single payer. And so basically 9.5% of 7,000. But what happens if I have a family and the family plan costs $18,000? What happens then? Under Section 36B, C, 2C, an individual who may enroll in an eligible employee-sponsored plan may nevertheless be eligible for a premium tax credit if the employee-sponsored coverage either is unaffordable or fails to provide minimum value. Future regulations concerning employee-sponsored coverage will provide final rules on determining affordability for related individuals and proposed rules on determining minimum value. Yep, time to get a lawyer out here. Individuals applying for advanced credit payments are required to provide exchange with information on whether employee-sponsored coverage is available to them. And this is one of the things we talked about last week. The proposed regulation provides an eligible employee-sponsored plan provides minimum value only if the planned share of the total allowed cost of benefits provided under the plan is at least 60%. So in a lot of cases, if you get the minimum, you still got to come up with 40% of the cost yourself. And so let's see some. Yeah, the employee premium tax credit is computed based on the premium for the applicable second lowest cost silver plan in the rating area which the taxpayer resides and is offered by the qualifying exchange. And changes in circumstances. For taxpayers with household incomes below 400% of the federal poverty level, the amount of additional tax liability the taxpayer must repay is capped. And so basically, if it changes, you get a divorce, and you say, oh, you have to pay some money back. Okay, so if you make at least 300 but less than 400, basically the most you have to worry about paying back is $2,500. Between 200 and 300, $1,500. Less than $600. And you know how the IRS can go. They haven't made the determination which they will just withhold everything right up front or whatever, but that's still to work. Another one, as I was going through, married taxpayers filing separately. Section 36B C1C provides that married taxpayers who do not file a joint return are not applicable taxpayers and are not allowed a premium tax credit. Accordingly, married taxpayers who receive advance credit payments but do not file a joint return must repay the advance credit payment. The advance credit payment must be allocated equal to each taxpayer for the purpose of determining the amount of excess advance payment. So, bingo, if you want the tax payment, premium tax credit, you can no longer file joint separate. If you're married, you have to file jointly. And I don't think people were thinking about that. And again, when it goes the income tax, and when you go in to do it, it goes from here. These are all the things that you're going to have to take in consideration when you go in and go to file your income tax. Affordable Health Care Act, qualifying health care plan, family size, household income in general, modified adjusted growth income, dependents, lawfully present, federal poverty reserve, advance credit payment, exchange, self-only coverage, family coverage, rating area, effectability, application date, applicable taxpayer, married taxpayers must file joint returns, individuals not lawfully present or incarcerated, determination of Medicare or Children Health Insurance Program, CHIPS ineligibility, employee sponsors minimum coverage, eligibility for months during the pain, waiting periods, continuum coverage, affordable coverage, change in filing status, additional tax limitation tables, method of allocation, pediatric dental coverage, additional benefits, plan covering more than one family, applicable percentage tables. These are all the stuff that you're going to have to start doing next year. And I'm pretty good at this stuff, but I can say that this is going to take a long time. It goes, an individual who is not lawfully present in the United States or is incarcerated other than incarcerated pending disposition of charges is not eligible to enroll into a qualified health plan during exchange. However, the individual may be an applicant taxpayer if the family member is eligible to enroll in a qualifying health plan. So if the taxpayer's household income is less than 10% of the federal poverty line for the taxpayer's family size, and the taxpayer or a member of the taxpayer family is an alien unlawfully present in the United States, the taxpayer is treated as an applicable taxpayer. So lawful aliens will be able to, they'll be required to take part of the Affordable Health Care Act. And so, and it just goes on and on and on. And again, like I said, 24 pages. Really, I think it's 8-point font. And it's not going to be easy. And as we've talked about before, why does the cost of Medicaid has gone up so much? In Capital Ideas, the Council of State Governments Insight and Innovation. This is a Democratic, a left-leaning magazine, and produced by the Council of State Governments. Healthcare reform to-do list. Well, and they've gone around the country and looked, and one of the problems is there's not enough doctors. And that recently, last week in the Keene Sentinel, where it said that doctors are refusing to take Medicaid and Medicare patients. So you can put a heck of a lot more people in Medicaid, but if no one wants to take them, and this one right here, recruiting doctors to fill the need. Yakima, Washington, nurse practitioner, family nurse practitioner, and deputy medical director. It has 18,700 patients. 90% of the patients, have income levels less than 200% of the federal poverty level. So basically, they're making less than $30,000 a year. There was 65,000 visits plus 5,000 housing and outreach encounters. They have a budget of $14 million. $14 million, you can go to Dartmouth Hitchcock up in Hanover, and they may have $14 million worth of surgeries in a week or two. 70% of that budget comes from Medicaid. That's what's going up. 10% from federal government grants, 6% from Medicare, 65 and over, retired, 5% self-funding, state funding, 5% private self-pay, and 4% private insurance. So out of this $14 million in this one, to take care of 18,700 patients, 91% of all costs of the $14 million budget comes from taxes. Family Health Center of Marshfield Incorporated, 26 sites across northern Wisconsin, has 92,063 patients. 90% of the patients have income less than 200% of the federal poverty level. They had 516,290 visits, and they have a budget of $160 million. Of that $160 million, 61% comes from Medicaid, 13% from private insurance, 9% from Medicare, 9% private support grant, 3% self-pay, 3% federal grants, 1% state funding, and 1% other income. So in Washington, 9% came either from insurance, private insurance, or people paid out of their pocket. Right here, 12%. So that's 9% support. Let's see, right here. 16% is from private insurance or out of their own pocket. Now we go to Louisiana. Number of patients, 18,000. Poverty level, 78% of patients have income less than 200%. Total patient visits, 65,000. Budget, $11 million. 40% Medicaid. 33% federal government grants, 20% Medicare, 6% private insurance, 1% state funding. Again, basically 6%. Now we get closer to home. The East Boston Neighborhood Health Center. Located one main campus in East Boston, has 60,000 patients. 69% of the patients have income less than 200%. It has more than 300,000 visits, appointments a year, has a budget of $96.4. 37% is Medicaid and other state low-income insurance program. 25% is non-federal grants contracts. 21% federal government grants. 13.6% private insurance. And 2.4% self-pay. Again, this is 16%. And they have the lowest amount. 69% have incomes less than 200. Louisiana was 78. Washington was 90. Wisconsin was 90. And one of the problems they're having is one of the things that you have to look at the affordable health care is just showing in these 4 areas, the great majority of these people don't have access to a regular doctor, a regular family physician, because they're either on Medicaid, Medicare, or they make a little bit more. They make more than 133%, so they don't qualify for Medicaid and Medicaid, so they're not being treated. And so once we get up to the 133 to 200%, for example, more of the people will want to be treated. And part of the thing is, where are we going to get the doctors? A lot of these, it's a lot of nurse practitioners are doing a lot of the work. And there's more and more nurse practitioners and physician assistants who are running the shows. Wisconsin, for example, has now changed some rules that allow dental, what do you call this? Bang, bang, bang. Dental, shoot, like I saw it before, where it's not the dentist, but they have some people, it's not dental assistants, where they're providing, they're doing basic cavity refilling to help keep down the cost. And so, I just kept going and looking and going through it. Medicare payments for primary care service provided by primary care doctors will be increased to 100% of the Medicare pay rate for 2013 and 2014, with the federal government paying 100% of this increase. States are expected to receive more than $11 billion in new funds for their Medicare primary care systems because of an increase in rate paid for primary care service, according to the Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Services. Okay? And so we can easily go and say it's $11 billion in free money, extra money that's going to help take care of it. But again, Medicaid payment for primary care service provided by primary care doctors will be increased to 100% of Medicaid payment rate for 2013 and 2014, with the federal government paying 100% of the increase. It doesn't say anything after 214, 215. And it also says $11 billion may seem like a lot, but once spread all over the country, it's not a lot. And then when you talk about new patients are going to be coming in. They may have high blood pressure. They may have diabetes, pre-diabetes. They have high cholesterol. And there's a whole bunch of other things that are going to happen. They may be heavy smokers. They may be heavy drinkers. They may have some mental illness. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. And the question is, again, where are you going to get the doctors? To me, if we want to provide quality health care and we want to reduce the cost, and we as a government think it's extremely important, why don't we create 2 or 3 medical academies? What we have done with the military academies, we have produced top-notch leaders and students and even doctors, and then we require them to work for us for 5 or 6 years, and then they go on. So just think, if I want to be a doctor, or your son and daughter wants to be a doctor, they get accepted to, say, the Medical Academy of the United States. And they go there for 4 years. They get their doctor's degree. Everything is paid for. And their commitment is, okay, for 5 or 6 years, you have to go and work in one of these poor or underrepresented areas. And then after 5 years, or 6 years, you're free to go. So now all of a sudden, you could be 28 years old, you could be a doctor, have 5, 6 years worth of experience, and not have a single bill to pay, no loans, no nothing, and then you can go in and make your millions and get your BMW or do whatever you want. And the government has benefited. The people in these rural areas have benefited. We do it great with military officers. We've been providing the airlines with great pilots for years. Why can't we do this for healthcare? Why can't we produce doctors? There's a shortage of doctors, and I'm pretty sure even if we produced 1,000 a year, they would do wonders. We used to do it with the it's a United States Public Health Service, and we still do it a little bit. We need to go back to that. That's the way to save money. That's the way to keep this number from going higher and higher. Because if we keep this number going higher, education and all the other services will be crowded out, because it's now coming down to a choice. Healthcare for poor life choices or education. People with no education, more prisons. So that's what we've done. Last year alone, we increased $26 billion for Medicaid and jail correction. And we reduced education and public assistance by $11 million. That's a choice that we have to make. And using this 24 pages on just 3 little subjects ain't going to cut it, ain't going to save us money. Just putting more people eligible to see a doctor isn't going to save us money, isn't going to get people healthier. So we need to think about it, and we need to come up with better solutions. And I'll come up with a few other things. And the more I was looking, boy, this is really getting tough. So when the senator from Montana says it's going to be held to bear when this thing comes out, it's going to be held to bear, because I don't think anybody has any idea of everything that's in this Affordable Health Care Act and how it's going to be implemented. So I'll be out there on the long road digging up more facts for you. So have a good time, and hopefully spring will come here and summer will be quicker. Thank you.